Apologies in advance for the rambling nature of this tale. I'm just going to give you a bit of history about Newbiggin Hall, which is in Temple Sowerby in Cumbria. The hall itself is a very old building. It goes back to the 1300s, and it's been rebuilt and reshaped and fortified over the centuries. The place goes back to a chapel to St. James. There was a religious community of sorts nearby. An outpost of the Knights Templar, I believe, took hold of a manor house in the nearby area, and that's at Temple Sowerby, just across the water from Newbiggin Hall. Newbiggin Hall was established and fortified and was a bastion to fight back against the Scottish border reivers. During the time when the English were fighting against the Scots in the 1500s, the Baron of the Hall took his men at arms and sallied forth to fight against the invading Scots. During this time, there was a clergyman that was based at the Hall. Most large families had their own private chapel, and a monk was stationed there. The lady of the house obviously stayed back away from the fighting, as was the norm in those days, and rumour has it that the lady of the house and the monk had a clandestine affair. When the Baron returned from fighting against the border reivers and found out the terrible thing, being a God-fearing man, he couldn't touch the monk, so he did the next best thing. He walled him up alive in the peel tower of the wing, thereby not harming him directly, but obviously causing the monk to die as he was walled up alive in the hidey hole that many of these places had, which, was common sense when you were trying to sort of hide from ravaging, invading border reivers. Let's fast forward a few centuries from the terrible events with the monk being walled alive in Newbiggin Hall. At the end of the 20th century, the Hall let out an entire wing to forestry students, and later on holidaymakers stayed in this place. Let me just describe the setting for you. It's a red sandstone building. It's turreted. There's crenellations, castellations around the roof of the place. The hall stands at the beginning of the Eden Valley, and nestled in a small part of the valley. It's surrounded by woodland. It has its own formal gardens laid out, and its view is that of the Pennines. So you can imagine the large mountains in the backdrop. That's the Lake District. Nearby you have the Pennines, which stretch the spine of the country, and this little spot is nestled, a garden, a river at the bottom. There's a footbridge that connects it over to the place wherein the Knights Templar were based, and down the road there's a typical little British pub. So it's a nice quiet spot. Where I come into this story is I was a student with a couple of other chaps, Chris and Tom, and we were studying, we were taking our rangering qualifications over at a nearby agricultural forestry college in the Lake District, and we were having a night in, sat by the Arga having a meal in the very large grand kitchen with its York stone floors, and we went up into the sitting room which looked out over the river, and the Major Henry Saury Cookson, who owned the main part of the hall, came through an adjoining door and came in to have a chat with us. This is unusual. He didn't often pop in. He left us to get on with our own designs. And he was telling us this tale about the monk and the history of it. It was one of those interesting evenings where he was giving it was a bit of a raconteur, telling us some tales. We thought nothing of it. He went back into the hall proper. We glimpsed through the adjoining doorway, a massive staircase and sets of armour. We'd only ever been into the kitchen of the main hall, so having a nosy in was quite a treat for us. As the evening went on, we were sat having a few glasses of wine and chatting about the story and what we actually thought of the place, and we believed it, and this was in the day before everybody checked everything on the internet, so at the time we just took it as read. We stayed up quite late. It was a winter's evening. It was quite cold outside, and we drew the shutters over the windows. It was a very old building, creaky floorboards, wind whistling through the place, but the attraction of the place, it was effectively a small castle. As 3 students, we were renting out the wing. There was the main part of the wing. There were 3 grand rooms, each with 4-poster beds. There was the green room, the Jerusalem room, and the master bedroom, which I'm not sure if it had its own name or not. And then there was the turret. There could have been 4 of us staying there, but we decided we'd just have the 3 of us living in there. So I took the turret, which had 2 rooms. It had a reception room with a spare bed in, and I did my studies in there. Then my own sort of double bed with a tiny garret light that I could just peer up and open the window and look out onto the fells. Now, at this particular point, the Major had been round and told us that I'd have to sort of sleep in one of the other rooms because the garret floors were being stripped and re-varnished. Everything was sort of just down to sort of bare floorboards, and they were restaining and varnishing the floor to keep it in good nick. So I wasn't staying in my usual room that night. I was staying in the Jerusalem room. As I retired for the evening, I was the last to go to bed. It was a nice change to be in this 4-poster bed, a bit creaky. And as I got into bed to settle down for the evening, the door handle started to turn on my bedroom. Now, I lay in bed thinking, it's either Tom or Chris playing a bit of a prank on me to sort of wind me up, this not being my regular abode. And then the door handle went again, and there's a bit more force being played on it. And I said, give up. Thought they would just chuckle and retire to bed. No answer. I didn't hear any sound on the floorboards, and sat there thinking, this is very odd indeed. I don't like this. I was getting a little bit agitated at this particular point, and sort of fumbled around looking for a bedside lamp to see if someone was coming in, and the door handle went again, and I said, guys, knock it off, it's late, let's get some rest. And the noise subsided, but no footsteps. The next day I asked the guys at breakfast which one of you 2 clowns was rattling on the bedroom door. Both of them looked at each other and said, no, you were the last one to bed, Pete. Well, it was one of us. I told them what had happened, and they said, it's your imagination playing tricks with you. You're wrapped up in the monk story, aren't you? So I just laughed it off and thought little of it. Now that weekend, Chris went away to go back to visit his girlfriend who lived in Kent at the time, so he drove from the Lake District down there. Bad timing had it that 2 of Chris's brother's friends arrived for the weekend, 2 American ladies, and I can't remember for the life of me either of their names. So they were looking to find Chris, who'd been recommended that they visit this castle place by Chris's brother. So Tom and I took them to the local pub and had a few drinks and, said, you must visit these places, and sort of rattled off sort of must-see sites like Castle Rigstone Circle at the top of the Lake District. And then went back to the house and said, look, girls, you were here to visit Chris. Do you mind bunking in the master bedroom? It's a massive 4-poster bed. You'll be fine sleeping in there. There's enough room. We've got spare bedding and everything. I can't use my garret room because the floor is being up for repair and what have you. So I'm sleeping in the middle room here. They went off to bed and they were thrilled to bits to be sleeping in a 4-poster bed of an English castle. Next morning at breakfast, they came down and said, which one of you guys was playing with the door handle? And I said, oh my God, you've had this as well. That happened to me when I slept in for the first night in the Jerusalem room. The girls didn't sleep a wink, and whilst they were thrilled they'd been to an English castle, they were never coming back, and they went off the very next day. And subsequently, after the story's been corroborated, there've been sightings and reportings of the monk at Newbiggin Hall. And that's where I leave the tale. I have no more sightings of my own to corroborate on that. After I went back to my own garret room, I never had the door handle interfered with or anything like that, but the place itself has got a bit of a creepy vibe to it. What would you expect in a castle that's sort of 600-700 years old? Thanks for listening, and if you ever get the chance to visit Newbiggin Hall and stay in the wing, give it a go. It's a beautiful place, but it does have a bit of an eerie feel to it. So, forewarned is forearmed.